How do you get a polar bear from Denmark and a doctor from Canada all the way to Nayarit, Mexico with the sole purpose of training with the best in the best conditions for 6 weeks? Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Tiger Sands podcast. My name is Alex, and today I'll be interviewing Dan Miller, aka SupDoc, while he talks about the ins and outs of his Wave Warrior SUP retreat in collaboration with Christian Anderson that occurred earlier this year leading up to the ProSayulita SUP Open. Hello, hello.
Good
How are
morning.
you? Good morning.
I'm well. I just
I,
woke up a little while ago and there's like a foot of snow outside.
oh my God. And here I am, struggling, it's too hot here. It's already too hot here. I'm like already sweating and it's like 8 in the morning. No.
I would never complain about living in a sauna.
Oh my goodness. Um, well, thank you so much for being on here. It's also the very first interview that I'm doing on my podcast. So I'm also a beginner when it comes to these things, but as we already realized, considering that I didn't even know how to work my own audio. Um, but I do want to get into things, and I do want to talk about the time that you spent here in Sayulita. I mentioned it a lot on my podcast throughout the last few weeks about training with you guys. But I want to talk about the Wave Warriors Sub Academy, your guys's your guys' program, because I do think it is a pretty cool thing, and I want to learn more about it, and maybe other people want to learn more about it. So that's okay with you. We can
Yeah.
we can talk about it. Sweet. So before we start, I do want you to give like just a quick little introduction of yourself. Who you are, what do you do, all the above.
All right. So, to sum up my life, I am Dan Miller. I'm a doctor. I'm a dad. I'm a coach, and I'm an athlete most of the time. I'm 44 years old, and I've been paddling for about 20 years now, and surfing for about 30 years. When I was a kid, I grew up in Calgary, Canada, and every summer or winter, I think every winter, we would go on a little vacation to Hawaii, and I would always ditch my family and go and try to surf. And one of my uncles growing up was this really awesome surfer, and I always was jealous and kind of mad at my parents for raising me in Calgary because they were from California, and I thought it's just not fair. Like I should be in the ocean. And so as soon as I finished high school, I got out of here. I left Canada, and I ended up in Hawaii on the Big Island, and pretty much surfed every day.
Very
Lived on the
nice.
beach, showered on the beach. I went to college there, and like the beach was my shower, pretty much. Living in the woods. I was homeless while I was a college student,
Oh wow.
and I was a janitor at the school to save enough money just to pay for tuition. And somehow or another, I ended up going to medical school. And once again, it was on an island, and I woke up every morning and went out into the water. So I went to med school in St. Martin in the Caribbean, and they don't really have very good waves.
Mm.
So that's when I bought one of my, maybe not my first paddleboard, but that's when I seriously got into it. So every day I'd get up and paddle for an hour, sometimes 2 hours, until one day one of my professors caught me and kind of got mad at me. You got to be studying 24/7
Mm.
on the water. But I just refused to listen, and I kept going, and I ended up pretty much doing the same thing every day since. And I try to paddle every day. And about a year ago, it was a year ago, I came down to Mexico for the Salulita Open. So what happened was I was every year, like most of us paddlers, we try to plan out our season in January. And I'm trying to go through all these races, and all of a sudden this race just pops up on Instagram.
Mhm.
It was a picture of Connor Baxter racing in Sayulita, and I thought, oh yes, like I love racing with Connor. I always get better when I'm in a race of that caliber. So I thought that's a great one in March. It's the first one I can get in North America. So that's all I knew about it. Like I didn't know
Mhm.
anything at all about Mexico. And Like I think when I was younger, I might have driven down across the California border a few times. So my whole picture of Mexico was like Tijuana and maybe the first 20 kilometers of Baja coast.
Mm-hmm.
So I just thought, okay, I'm gonna go down and do this race. So I was chatting with one of my sponsors, and it just turns out that he had a house in Nuevo.
Oh, perfect.
Thought, oh, this is awesome! Like, let's go. And so he came, and we got a couple new boards. We both got some NSP Carolinas, which is a board I don't really use that much at the time because I'm in Calgary, like it's totally flat here. And we
Yeah.
bring these boards down. It took us like 48 hours to get there. So we drove to San Diego from Calgary. That's 24 hours, and it was a snowstorm the whole way. And from
Oh,
San
wow.
Diego, we flew on Frontier Airlines because they can take race boards. So we flew down with our boards, and both of them got smashed up on the airline. So the first week in Mexico, I was spending it fixing boards.
Mhm.
And anyways, that's kind of how I got introduced to your neck of the woods.
Yeah.
And ended
And
up,
we did meet for the first time on that when you guys came here, correct?
that's right.
Yeah, we
That's right.
did.
I'd been down there for a couple weeks training, and then we showed up to do the race, and I loved it.
Mm-hmm.
It's a great group of
It's
people,
fun.
and you guys have like the best training grounds, the best
Yes, we
water.
do.
Everyone's friendly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that was the first time you guys visited Mexico. And for the event, I mean, and the second was kind of different. So
Yeah.
like, so you guys or was it your idea or whose idea was it to start an academy
Okay.
for
So
the 2024
I'll tell
race?
you all about the story of how it all began.
Okay, and also tell me how you somehow managed to get a kid from Denmark on board, Christian Anderson.
Yeah. So let's see. It's 2023. I'm coming down to Mexico for a spring race. But if you back up maybe 3 months, I was in Europe. Maybe no, about 6 months earlier, I had been in Europe for the World Championships. We were in Poland, and I think 2022, maybe whenever. Yeah, I was in
Okay.
Poland in 2022, and I had gone over that year to do the APP series of races. And so while I was there, I knew who Christian Anderson was, and there's a whole group of guys that kind of follows the different racing scenes. And
Mm-hmm.
you got the Euro Tour guys, you got the APP guys, and then you got all the local racers that never really leave. And I'm one of these guys that I try to do everything I can all over the world if I can. And in 2022, I pretty much used up all my air miles. I think like 300,000 air miles, and I just
Oh,
registered
wow.
everything. And one of them was in Poland, and somehow or another, I ended up talking to Christian. And like this kid, I knew him since I was a lot younger. When my first big Pacific paddle games, I remember him.
Oh.
He was tiny, like he must have been 15, 14 or 15 years old. And he was introduced as the kid from Denmark, like the little kid. He was little.
He didn't have the nickname back then, did he?
He didn't, no.
No.
He was just this little blonde kid, and he was Casper's sidekick. So
Oh,
like they'd
yeah.
introduced Casper, world champion, and then next to him is and here's his little friend Christian.
Hmm.
So like I just remember that kid kicked my butt that first Pacific Paddle Games. And I'm the old guy trying to get into racing. It was my first pro race, and I think he just destroyed me. But
Mhm.
I always knew who he was, and I always see a big smile on his face. So I knew he was a nice guy. And in Poland, I just went over and started talking to him. And I don't really remember the details, but we became friends pretty quick. And he invited me to come and train with him. And he had this big training camp he had planned out for Spain in 2023. And it was going to be, I think, April and May. We were going to just train every day and do all these Euro Tour races over there. So I ended up going. I think it was April and May, or maybe it was May. But anyways, we went over, met up in Spain, and Christian and I shared a room. We both had a sleeping bag on the floor of this room,
Nice.
and he's the guy's hilarious. He's got a sleeping mask and his earphones, and it's like if it's 9 o'clock and lights out, and he's asleep. So I'm up over there in Spain working on my computer because I got to do my work stuff.
Mhm.
I'm up until
Especially with the time change and everything too, right?
yeah, and the only way I can afford to do any of that is to keep
Yeah.
working. So I'm up like 2 or 3 in the morning on my computer, and he's next to me having his beauty sleep. Yeah, we became like really good friends there, and we trained every day. And in the end, like we did all these races and improved a ton, and it was just such a good camp. So fast forward to this whole, I'm in Mexico, and I'm racing, and it's just awesome. Like if you look at Spain and what it has to offer, it's
Mhm.
warm, it's cheap, it's got good food, it's got friendly people, and the water conditions are pretty rad. And it's almost the same as what you can get in Mexico. Like almost
Same language too.
yeah, same language. It's like the houses look the same, like some of them, I guess not all of them, but
Mhm.
just the Spanish style architecture, and like so many similarities. And that's kind of how it started. I just thought like, let's do the same thing. Let's do it in Mexico this year.
Mhm.
And so I kind of knew a little bit about it, and it's the first race of the year. So I was trying to think of how can we do a spring training session this year, and just make it, how can I get Christian to come over? That was kind of it. I just invited him. I kind of told him about what I wanted to do.
Mhm.
I just had this idea that we could I love it so much, and I've got so many friends up in Canada and northern US that I thought, let's do a training camp. And I benefited so much from training with Christian that I thought, there's other people that can do the same type of thing. But it is like a pretty specialized type of training, so we can't
Yeah,
just open it
definitely.
up to everybody, because you can't have like 10 different people with different skill sets coming, because it's going to be really tough.
Mhm.
So once we had this framework of what we wanted to do, I just started to reach out to individual people that I knew would want to do it, and that's kind of how we got it going. But I actually came back to Mexico in the middle just to scout it out, and that's when I ended up finding Punta de Mita, and
Oh.
some housing, and the waves looked really good there, and so we just kind of took a chance, and like having only spent 6 hours in the area, that's how we figured it out. And when I talked to Christian, he was interested, and I didn't know, like halfway through we were getting ready to come over, and I think it was I got a message from Christian that he wasn't going to come, and
What?
we
Oh,
were
wow.
fully, yeah, I know. So we
I
were fully
haven't heard about this.
ready to go, and all of a sudden I get this scary message that he can't come. So I guess he was a little scared of Mexico, of driving.
Oh,
He was, you hear stories of,
yes. Yeah,
especially
definitely.
along the border. I don't know if you guys get them down there as much as we get them up in the news in Canada.
You guys, the United States and Canada, you guys really only get the bad stuff, and all that's like, and a lot of it does come from the border just because that's the closest that is to um higher north. But like north down, it's almost like you never hear anything
Yeah,
from it. And that's like the majority of Mexico. But yeah,
yeah,
there's definitely there can be concerns going going down through the border.
there is. And I feel like there are definitely some scary things that I was hearing. And I actually met a girl from Sayulita who was working at one of the outdoor fitness type stores in Calgary. And I asked her kind of where I should drive. And she's like, definitely don't go through Texas, go along the coast.
Mm-hmm.
And like, that's pretty vague. But we ended up, I just told, I told Christian, like, it's so safe. There's nothing to worry about. But honestly, I didn't know. So he was like, okay, I told you I'd come. I promised I'd come. I'm just a little nervous, but let's do it. So
Yeah.
he flew to Calgary in, it was cold. It was like -40. So this
No.
guy
Oh God.
shows up. He's never been in anything colder than maybe, but still surfable in that kind of weather. And he shows up, and I had to give him one of my winter jackets, like his big puffy Carhartt jacket and some boots because he didn't have any cold weather
Hmm.
clothes. And we loaded up 22 boards onto the car, and we took off on our way down on an adventure of a lifetime.
Nice. And that's awesome. How was the trip down? Are there any like things that happened or because like you mentioned a few things while you've been here.
Yeah, there was, I mean, nothing major, but I think one of the culture shock, like you talk about this a little bit in your other podcasts, just like the differences in the cultures.
Hmm.
I've been down there a few times, like to Baja. And I think when I was 18 and I drove down and I got stopped by the federales and everyone's holding a machine gun, that was a
Oh
shock
yeah.
to me because
And
I'd never seen one before.
and it's totally common here.
Yeah, it's totally
It's so
normal.
common here, yeah.
And so like I was ready for it, and it didn't really bug me too much. But
Hmm.
Christian somehow ended up getting every machine gun on video and made a big compilation of all of the guns
Oh
and
my
everything.
gosh.
Pretty funny. But yeah,
Oh
we it was
jeez.
pretty safe, and I
Hmm.
think the scariest part of our trip was the narrow highway in Baja California, where there's a semi truck coming one way, and
Hmm.
I'm going the other way with my trailer that's wider than me, and I'm barely touching the line, and I'm barely on the edge of the road, which is a drop off.
Oh.
It's like every single truck, my stress level went through the roof while Christian was sleeping in the seat next to me.
Oh, peacefully
So it
getting his
was a
beauty
stressful
sleep.
trip for me. That was,
Did he get to drive or was that a no-no?
yeah, I let him drive a little bit,
Okay.
but I don't know. I have a truck that it drives pretty nice. I have a Toyota Tundra and a big trailer,
Hmm.
and I think for the most part I did most of the driving. I think he may have driven 2 or 3 hours the whole trip.
Mm.
But yeah, we got down to La Paz, Mexico, and it's all desert and sand and cactus, and I had no idea really what to expect down there. I've never been down there before. And we crossed over and to the jungle pretty much.
Hmm.
It was awesome. So it was such an awesome adventure. Just stopping every
Yeah.
night wherever we could find a place to park, and then as soon as we got over to your neck of the woods, we were in the water all day, every day. It
Yeah.
was the most awesome trip I've ever been on. Yeah.
That's so awesome. Let's definitely talk about like the actual time you guys spent here because you guys were here for what, 6, 7 weeks? At least around there.
Yeah. I think we were there for 7 weeks. Well, tell
Okay.
me, when you moved to Mexico, were you in the water surfing every single day?
Oh yeah, I was definitely a lot tanner than I am now. I think we would always go to the beach. We'd always be like boogie boarding or surfing. Um, it wasn't necessarily like paddle boarding because we didn't get into that until like 4 or 5 years after we moved here. But my parents did have a paddleboard, and I have a few photos of me eating it on waves because I didn't know how to catch waves. um, and then and yeah, we mainly just had boogie boards and just like a foamy surfboard. We got like a foamy surfboard with Wavestorm back
Yeah,
in 2011 when we first moved here, and we still have it now. It's
those are
still,
classic. What kind of a
yeah.
paddleboard did you have?
We had an an Oz board.
Nice.
Yeah.
That sounds great.
Yeah. We had two of them, I think. And I've seen GoPro videos of like my mom and my dad paddling and everything. And it's so weird that considering how central that sport is to me now and to my life and my brother's life, how it started, like my parents started doing it. Like my
Yeah,
dad and my mom bought the paddle boards for them.
yeah,
Um, and we would just use it every once in a while. But yeah, it's definitely fun to see.
that's pretty sweet. Was the first big
Nice.
race you got to participate in or watch, was it the World Championships when they came?
So that was before we even started paddling. That's before we even started paddling, and so we didn't know many people that were involved. Now looking back at photos, I can name everyone that was there.
Yeah.
And Trace got a photo of Zayn too, back in the day, and Trace didn't even know who Zayn was, but like my parents were like, just get a photo.
Yeah.
Um, and but you could definitely, it was definitely like high energy, high vibes, because it was a really big event. And we didn't even know Bicho, who was going to be our coach at the time. We didn't know who he was at the time. We didn't really mix with him. And that year he got second place in the distance at the ISAs. So we got to see it and everything, but we weren't involved in that scene until the next year.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are pretty exciting, those ISA events.
I honestly wish that I knew about them, about these people and about the sport before, so I'd be able to like actually enjoy and celebrate and everything. But one year behind. I
Yeah.
was 1 year behind.
It's okay though. It's growing slowly, and
Mm-hmm.
I think like the ISA is a good platform for the community in a lot of these places where I've been to four now, and I
Mm-hmm.
always feel like when we go to anywhere to race in one of these, it's a whole bunch of people come to watch, especially the parade. So,
The parade, yep.
so did you get to see the parade?
I I it was like how long ago was that? Like 8, 9 years. I
Yeah, it
was
was 8 years ago.
I was 10, so I really do not have a good memory of what was happening 10 years ago, but from the photos that my parents took, it looked absolutely amazing. And I saw the documentary the USA team made, Chasing Gold, I think is what it's called. Like we've watched the documentary the USA team
Mhm.
made for that year. So we understand the energy, or I understand the energy. Whether or not I remember it through my own experiences, that's I'd have to say probably not.
Yeah. It's definitely memorable. When I first was doing those, the parade was always kind of like I didn't really like it. There's so many people, and you're
That's the
walking through
best
the
part.
streets and you're tired, and I realize sup racing is actually like to watch as a spectator, especially
Mm-hmm.
distance racing. It's like really boring
Yeah,
because
it is really
we're
boring.
not moving very fast. Nothing's
Yeah.
changed. The occasional person might fall or something like that, but it's pretty boring. So the parade's
Mm-hmm.
actually probably the most exciting part of SUP.
Yeah.
Other than tech racing. And
Yeah.
I think SUP
Whenever,
racing
yeah.
is like rad. It's like right on. So
Mm-hmm. Yeah, whenever I always let my friends know when I'm gonna be competing in town, because they always wanna like support me and come visit me. And and they're like, when are you competing? And I'm like, okay, Saturday and Sunday. But just come on Saturday. That's the tech race. Like you don't have to go on the distance race because
yeah,
you're just gonna sit there. You're not gonna do anything. And I'd
yeah,
rather you actually like see me paddle rather than see me go to some fun show and back.
yeah. I know.
Yeah.
That's what I tell people too. Like, don't even bother coming to the distance
Yeah.
race.
Don't even
Just come
bother.
to the finish. Start or the finish. That's all that's really
Yeah.
important.
Mhm.
Well, let me tell you a little bit about the Wave Warrior Academy this year, kind of what we did every year.
Yes.
So
Give me the rundown of what
I
you're
will.
like. Yes.
And just stop me if you have any questions, because I can
Okay.
go on
Okay.
forever. But
Sounds
so
good.
we had this idea of what we wanted to do, and it was to
Mm-hmm.
train ourselves. We wanted to do a spring camp. And for me, that means like really training my ass off all day long. And I don't get this kind of opportunity where I live. There's a lake, and it's really flat water. It's not moving. And you might as well just be standing on a 2x4 on the ground, because like it's just boring. It's like running ultra marathons on a treadmill is kind of the comparison. Like it's
Makes
really boring.
sense.
There are some beautiful lakes, there's some beautiful mountains, but when I'm racing and I come to an ocean, it's really hard to bridge the gap between flat water paddling and ocean paddling when I don't get to train there. So I was super stoked to come and just put in tons of time on the water. And then we had some guests each week, would be a different couple, two or three, sometimes up to 8 people would come to train with us, and everyone had different levels of experience, but kind of the basics that we did every day. We'd wake up at I woke up at 7 o'clock every morning, um, pretty much, and I have a husky, so I had to walk my dog. And then
Nice.
we would take all the boards out. If guests wanted to join us, we would get their boards ready. But it was me and Christian for most of the time, and Linus came for a few weeks as well.
Mm-hmm.
And we would walk our boards down. It was a couple blocks down to the water, and we would paddle. So our morning session consisted of paddling. Like most of the time, it was paddling to one of the surf breaks. So we were 3 kilometers from La Lancha or 2K from El Faro, and forgive me if I'm not pronouncing the names right, but that's what I
Don't
call
worry.
them. So there was like
You're good.
lighthouse. Okay, good. And every day there were waves. Every day there was something to surf. And
Mm-hmm.
on a race board, it's like really easy to access these places. And if you're not on a race board, it's pretty tough to like prone paddle 2 or 3 kilometers.
Definitely.
Then you're isolated from everybody. There's no way to get there other than to paddle. So every day we would paddle to El Faro and we would surf for about an hour and a half to 2 hours on our race boards. So what we kind of did for our workouts, if it was a workout day, we would paddle out hard, kind of like an interval, and then we would surf it in. And occasionally we would try to go out and in hard and fast. But
Mm-hmm.
for the most part, it was just like you'd paddle really hard to get out and then reward yourself with a sick wave coming in. And it were always good waves out there, like
Yeah.
every day. And the first week, I think I remember Christian and I had just come in off of like this 3 hour session, and we just had these huge smiles on our faces. And he looked over at me and he's like, "That's the best surf session I've ever had in my life."
Oh, that's awesome.
And
That's so fun.
it was just rad. So that
Mm-hmm.
was our first week, and we we just did it every day. So that was our morning from 7. Well, we didn't get in the water till usually 7:30 or 8. And those were the
Mm-hmm.
sessions that you joined us on when we
Mm-hmm.
were like working out, and we'd always try to incorporate a wave somewhere into the mix.
Yeah.
And then we'd come back, have some breakfast, and then we would get have our guests come down and join us at about 10. I think usually every morning at 10 we'd go back out and we'd go through skills. So it all depends on the skill level of the people that were there. But we'd go through like the stroke, footwork, and we'd get as advanced as they needed to be or where they were at. So most people were really similar to me, coming down from places where they just don't get ocean.
Yeah.
And it's funny because even I think most paddlers, I don't know what it is, but probably human nature, we want to do the easiest thing we can do subconsciously.
Yeah.
So if you look out on the water and you see like this glassy, beautiful conditions over here, and then over on the other side, it's choppy and windy, most people are going to go to the calm water. Or if you see like a beautiful 1 foot wave and it's glassy, or you see like a 6 foot wave and it's choppy, you're always going to go to the easy area. And in Alberta, where I'm living, it's the same thing. Like if half of the lake is glass and the other half is windy, they always go to the easy areas. And it's fun, it's easier, and that's just what humans do. So most
Mhm.
people that were coming down don't have a lot of choppy, like I don't know what to call it other than just like really crappy water experience. And I think anytime I race on the ocean, it sucks. Like the conditions suck. And so I kind of
Yeah.
made a rule a couple years ago that you always go to the suck because that's where you're going to improve.
Mm-hmm.
And Punta de Mita and Sayulita always have suck.
They
So
always have it somewhere. Yep.
so you can, either you're paddling out a mile out into the sea, or you're going around some point or a rock or something where the water sucks. And so I made that like kind of a rule. Anywhere it was choppy and crappy water, that's where we were going to train. And so we would take these people out into the ocean, which for the most part, like if you think about it, there's current and there's tides and there's wind waves and there's
Mm-hmm.
groundswell and there's a lot of movement. And then for some people, it's just like a couple fish under the water is enough to scare them. So plus you got like the beach, you got waves crashing on the beach and you got reef and you got urchins and there's all of these little things that can scare somebody.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a pretty big learning curve for everybody in their own way. And we'd focus on everyone's weaknesses and we would try to do as much one-on-one coaching as we could. So that was
Yeah.
the 10 o'clock session.
Yeah,
So
it was also a really big learning experience for me too, because it was the first time I was actually paddling with several high level athletes with you, with Christian, and when Linus came aboard to join us. It was it was definitely a really big learning experience, and a lot of times um I would struggle to keep up with you guys, and I'd like beat myself up about it, and then I remember like, these are like world-class paddlers. Like, I don't have to be like so hard on myself that I can't keep up with them because they're they're the best at what they do. So it was definitely a learning curve and kind of learning how to handle that that need to keep up with you,
yeah,
while also just like working on technique. I completely reformed my technique after being with you guys, and yeah, I
good.
think I'm on a good path. I'm on a good
Yeah,
path.
you are. And you're a lot faster than you think. So every day when some days are easy days that you came over
Mhm.
and some days were harder days. And like you didn't really know which day it was for
No, not
us.
at all.
And I remember one day we were doing it was pretty easy for us. It was like a zone 2, which is like recovery. And I had you and your brother circle around us.
Mhm.
Had to draft us for a while. And then when I'd yell at you, I'd call your name. You had to paddle
Yep.
around us all the way to the front and then drop back. And that's hard. And you did a great job at it, I remember. And then when you
Thank
were
you.
finished and you were totally exhausted, that's when we picked up our pace. And
Yep. Yeah, that's what I remember.
and I
That's
think
what
you
I
got
got.
dropped and it
I
was a
got
tough day for you.
absolutely drowned and thrown around in the white water from your guys' boards and like the waves clashing up against mine. Yeah,
Yeah.
that
But
was,
if you think about the race, that's pretty much what happens, right?
yep,
So if you don't
yep.
train it, like how are you ever going to get good at it?
Mm-hmm. That's for
But
sure.
it was definitely great having you come over for those sessions. And,
Yes, and thank you so
you
much for
know,
having me.
I feel the same way as you do. When I was training with Christian, he was, him and I together were able to do all of our easy stuff together. And then I would
Mm-hmm.
hang on for dear life during an
Yeah.
interval. And one of my weaknesses is my starts and my drafting because I don't
Mm-hmm.
have anyone like you. I don't
Yep.
have anyone to train with ever.
Mm-hmm.
I got my training partner Corey, and he comes and meets me every like maybe once a week or once every 2 weeks. But like, how often do you get a Christian Anderson to
Never.
train with every single day? And
Never.
so it definitely helped me as well. Just watching him and
Mm-hmm.
comparing myself, I got to see some big improvements. But yeah, like I think the biggest advantage to training in Mexico is
Mm-hmm.
the conditions.
Yep.
So yeah, it's warm, it's beautiful, the food's great, people are friendly, but all of that stuff aside, like to go like a 5-minute walk from your front door and jump
Mm-hmm.
in this like just perfect place to train. It doesn't get any more difficult anywhere in the world, and it's also not anywhere near as fun anywhere in the world. Like just
Yeah.
rad, awesome waves every single day,
Yeah.
and like
So
perfect.
for for as much as you're talking about it, are you considering coming back next year?
Definitely. Yeah, we're coming back.
Yes.
We're planning on a longer trip next year.
Awesome.
So right now, nothing is like the dates aren't totally set yet, but we're
Mm-hmm.
looking at all of January, February, and March.
That is awesome and crazy, but awesome.
Yeah.
It'll be fun for sure.
I think
It'll
it's going
be
to be a
awesome
lot
to have
more
you guys
fun.
here longer.
we'll make a few changes. Probably take
Mm-hmm.
a few more rest weeks where we're not coaching. We didn't
Yeah.
take any this year, so it was 6 straight weeks of
A full on.
24/7 every day. I had
Yeah.
zero rest, and it caught up to me when it came time to race. Like I was so tired
Mm-hmm.
that tech race. I think I was still putting people's fins in the board when they were lining up on the start
Oh
line
wow.
and trying to find leashes for people and making
Yeah.
sure that their paddles were there and trying to help
Mm-hmm.
because I was still coaching. We had 8 people the week of the race, and I think that was a tough one.
Yeah.
It's a really tough one for me. The tech race, like it went by so fast. I didn't even have a chance to process the whole thing.
So the entire thing was an overall just a big learning experience, and you're planning on
Yeah,
coming back next
definitely.
year. Awesome.
Definitely. So
Awesome.
we've got,
Awesome.
I already got the new boards purchased. We've
Oh,
got a
sweet.
little bit of a change. We got all flat decks coming down next year.
Nice.
Because this year we had all dugouts. And I think for a lot of folks traveling, they come from a flat deck board, and then now it's waves and wind and chop and surfing, and
Mm-hmm.
you fall out of one of those boards and it's really tough for them. So I got some new boards, and we still have to secure some of the other stuff like the housing. But yeah, we're definitely going to do it and improve it a lot. It'll be great.
Awesome. 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 Well, I don't want to end this, but we do have 1 minute left.
Okay.
So, so I think that was awesome. Thank you. So, like, sorry, I think I know
let
that
me
was
let me tell
awesome.
you a few things. Number
Okay,
one, I love
real
listening to
quick.
your podcast,
Thank you so
especially when
much.
you tie in your own life and how sup and the ocean is influencing you.
Mm-hmm.
I love it. And the other thing is that our training experience in Mexico was so awesome. Everybody, I hope you can keep your eyes on, like, I hope to do some good things, but just watch Christian this year. I predict
Yep.
he's going to win some big races, and it can pretty much all be attributed to the training time in Mexico. So
Awesome.
big things in the future. Thanks for having me on.
Yay. Yes,
Awesome.
of course. Thank you so much. And I'll see you later. Yes. Bye.
Bye, Alex.